What do you think, Eleanor? Should we kick it off?
Let's do it. Jalen, you want to take it away? And you should be able to choose speaker view if you haven't done that already, if you want to just focus on the person who's speaking, which will change. Go ahead, Jalen.
Okay. 1 second. I'm not sure if my connection might not be great. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Right now? Okay, cool.
I can hear you.
Yeah, let's get started. Welcome to the New Voices Festival and our first event, the Short Short. I'm Jalen Lisbon. I'm a English major. I have a writing minor and an education minor at Ithaca College, and I'm the assistant student director of the New Voices Festival this year. We're so glad that you have found us. We're really excited to share this space with you tonight and hear from our authors. First, a few technical issues. We'd love to see your face, but please mute your microphones. We have a lot of folks here with us, and we want to be sure that everyone can hear our authors as they read. A brief history of our festival. Every year since 2013, the Ithaca College New Voices Festival invites 7 writers who are at the outset of rich literary careers to come to campus in a celebration of reading, writing, and thought. For 3 days in April, we engage with their prose, poetry, and plays in public readings, discussion panels, class visits, and interdisciplinary music and theater performances. The distinguishing feature of the New Voices Festival is the involvement of Ithaca College students. Every year, 14 students are selected to be student guides for our authors, and that means that although our festival only takes place for 3 days, these students spend a semester studying the works of each of our authors. Finally, when the festival arrives, students have the opportunity to go beyond the page and connect with living writers. Students are involved at every step of the planning of the festival and its realization. In light of the COVID-19 virus, we definitely feel the loss of our typical face-to-face interaction, but we have worked hard to create an abbreviated virtual New Voices Festival while sticking to our values of collaboration and connection. Tonight, we'll hear our student guides introduce their authors, and we'll hear our New Voices authors offer short micro readings of their work.
Thanks, Jalen. I'm Chris Holmes, the chair of English at Ithaca College and the co-director of the New Voices Festival. And I want to welcome everyone to the 8th annual festival. And in particular, I want to thank our 7 authors who have come along with us on this strange journey from a college campus-centered festival to a virtual festival. And they have been so generous with their time and expertise. When we reached out to them and asked whether or not they'd be interested in trying to make something happen, even if we couldn't have the full festival that we had dreamed of since August, they came back with excitement, energy, and a willingness that we didn't anticipate. And it made the students who worked so hard over the course of the semester in our New Voices seminar, it made their hopes not be dashed when we all couldn't be socially together, knowing that the festival could still continue. They could have easily said, our writers, we've got enough to worry about. Thank you very much. The world is currently closed down and my hay fever symptoms wake me up every morning in a cold sweat. But from the start of this transition, they have been so helpful in making this all come together, and we couldn't thank them enough. This festival also wouldn't happen without the Ithaca College and broader Ithaca community, who have supported us from the very first year of the festival, helping us to grow from a teeny little germ into a festival that has continued over 8 years and grows, includes more students from more areas of the college and constantly pulls in more of the Ithaca city and town community in ways we never could have imagined when we first began. I want to also shout out to the New Voices alumni and our past student guides, our student directors and executive boards. I've been writing down names as quickly as I can as people have entered into the room. I'm going to miss tons, but I want to thank our Dean of Humanities and Sciences, Melanie Stein, Austin Bunn, Sophia Hebert, Maddie Stengel, Patty Zimmerman, Jasmine Gale, James Allen Hall, Lucy Graham, Jen Tennant, former director last year, Chaitali Sen, Margaret McGinnis, Asia Gable, Rose Manzicano, Logan, Lisa Swayze, our local bookstore general manager, members of the English and writing department's faculties who every year support us by bringing authors into their classrooms and coming to events with their own students, Izzy Stillwagon, Corey McElhaney, and folks, I know I'm missing many, but I just want to thank all of you who've taken the time to show up today and support us in this new version of the festival. Jorge Borges has a fitting line about books and their ability to help us imagine new forms of community. He writes, "A book is not an isolated being. It is a relationship, an axis of innumerable relationships. In this time when we can't help but feel so distant from one another, the New Voices Festival reminds us of the power of books to open community back up and to show us how to forge new communities, new relationships that will nurture us all in this time of need." I want to now introduce my co-director, the novelist and Robert Ryan Distinguished Professor of Writing, Eleanor Henderson.
Thank you, Chris. Hi, everybody. I'll just imagine your applause. I think you got almost everybody. I'm sure I'll forget folks too, but I just noticed also one of our first New Voices alums from our first year, Tim Horvath. Hi, Tim. And Tommy Pico from just last year. Thank you for coming back and being friends of the festival. It is really just making this moment that much more festive. It almost kind of feels like we're all crowded around in that room at Buffalo Street Books, and you know, we're all coming in late from work and carrying a tea from Green Star and just feeling that energy and what it means to be part of that Ithaca literary community. So I want to thank Buffalo Street Books and Lisa Swayze in particular. Buffalo Street Books has been the co-host of this event since the beginning, 2013. And in recent weeks, Lisa has been working so hard behind the scenes of this indie co-op bookstore that we love so much. Currently is the sole employee of the store. I'm on the board of the bookstore, and we've been so gratified by the support that the Ithaca community and beyond has shown to the store during this crisis and really throughout the years. So actually, in fact, originally this was supposed to be a fundraiser for Buffalo Street Books. We've decided, in light of the fact that we have met our $25,000 GoFundMe goal, thank you very much, Ithaca and beyond, that we're actually going to waive the donation suggestion. So if there was confusion about that entrance fee, we decided that really the best way that you can support the bookstore as well as our authors is to buy their books. So we really would love for you to head to buffalostreetbooks.com. We now have an event page. So if you click on the short right there on the front page of buffalostreetbooks.com, you can link to the short and there's a list there of all of our authors' books. We don't have Jonathan Spector on that list, but we'll get to be treated to some of his work at the end of tonight's reading. So please buy some books. It's a gift that goes in multiple directions. And if you like what you hear tonight, I hope you'll consider returning for some of Buffalo Street Books' other virtual events. This is not only the first night of New Voices, but it's also the first night of Buffalo Street Books' virtual event series, including an event with our own Alexandra Chang, who will be returning in conversation with the poet Michael Pryor on May 1st. Thanks.
The New Voices Festival has 2 more great events scheduled for the next couple of evenings. At the same time, 5:30 p.m. EST, Literature in the Time of Corona. This will be a panel discussion of all 7 of our writers about how we are reimagining reading and writing during this crisis. You can interact with and ask questions of the writers tomorrow at this panel. And then on Friday, we have a very special event, a unique multimedia musical collage directed by our own Kira Sky, which is inspired by the work of our new voices. You don't want to miss it, so please stay with us this week. Tonight, we'll be hearing from our 7 authors for about 5 minutes each, and they'll be introduced by our student guides. The authors will be reading in this order: C.J. Hauser, Elizabeth Lindsey Rogers, Andre Perry, Brendan Mathews, Nomi Stone, Alexandra Chang, and Jonathan Spector. So let's begin our short readings.
Is that over to me? Yeah. Okay. So, hi everyone. My name is Mian and I'm a senior studying English. Today it's my pleasure to introduce C.J. Hauser. C.J. is a professor, fiction writer, and essayist who's had her work published in Tin House, Tri-Quarterly, and the Paris Review, to name a few. Hauser became a sensation with her 2019 viral essay, The Crane Wife, published in the Paris Review, a remarkable personal essay that explores and confronts what it takes to reclaim selfhood and strength and how to let go. Her most recent novel, Family of Origin, centers on 2 siblings, Elsa and Nolan, in the wake of their father's death on a remote island full of scientists that are part of a fictionalized scientific movement called reversalism, or the belief that Darwinism is running backwards. In many ways, Family of Origin extends and further complicates the core of The Crane Wife, with deepened themes of generational difference, familial conflict, and climate existentialism. Of all the topics CJ deals with, I was most interested in how she represents letting go of grief in the past, a subject she addresses in this quote. Older people were always handing younger people things to carry, things they said it was important to bring forward. But maybe if Nolan and Elsa Gray could lay these down, if they could forget for just a little while, they might be able to finally get somewhere. So lastly, I'd like to say thanks to CJ and everyone for attending, for the opportunity to make this introduction, and I recommend reading the novel yourselves. So thank you.
Mian, thank you so much for that. And can you come with me on book tour next time? Thank you, Eleanor and Chris, and especially all the students for putting this together. I don't know, it is reminding me of the parts of life that are still things that I love and that I love being part of. So this is a wonderful, I don't know, it's a wonderful event and I'm deeply grateful. So I'm going to read, I wasn't in the mood to read to you about wondering about the end of the world, so I'm going to read you some very tiny love stories, which are true, which are part of a longer essay called Blood, 27 Love Stories from Life, which is sort of like a hope chest of little love stories from my family that I've collected and stitched together into a piece. So I'll just read you a few of these. And I'm holding it upside down, which is how you know I am a professional. All right, so. All cacti are succulents, but not all succulents are cacti. 1994. My parents go on vacation to Arizona. They bring back souvenir cacti for my sister Leslie and me. Within a month, both of our cacti are dead. My sister's is desiccated and crippled, dead of thirst. Mine is rotten through and slumped. I have overwatered and flooded the roots. Our parents exchange a look, as if they know already that love will not be easy for us, that we are differently but equally screwed. Corn syrup, 1997. My middle school puts on Macbeth. Danny Kruger played the second murderer. I was the director's assistant and liked skulking backstage in all black and carrying a clipboard. It was opening night. Danny ran off stage after killing Banquo. He found me in the dark and we whispered. It had gone well. He was triumphant. He was covered in red corn syrup blood. I want to hug you, but, he said. Hug me, I said. I was covered in fake blood, and this was what love was like. My best friend started dating his best friend, and we would talk on the phone at night. It was an elaborate process getting all 4 of us on the line, and once we did, we were often confused about who was who. "You're so funny," I would say to who I thought was Danny. "That wasn't me," he would say. After these conversations, my best friend and I would call each other direct. Which one said he liked Nirvana? Which one wanted to be a cook? Whose mother could drive us to the movies? We were never sure. Blood, 1967. My mother has told me 100 times about the boy who sold his blood to buy her flowers. He had a motorcycle, she says. He had no money, but he wanted to take me on a date, so he went out and sold pints of his blood so he could do it. Pints. He was woozy at dinner, she says. He couldn't eat it all. He seemed like he was going to faint. But he bought me flowers, lilies. Isn't that romantic? This story bothers me. It intrudes upon my father, and that is part of it, but it's also the way my mother wields these blood flowers as some false barometer of love, as if her generation got blood and mine is worthy only of backstage corn syrup. My mother has asked me every Valentine's Day since I was 14, "Did he buy you flowers?" I told him not to, I say. "Why would you do that?" she says. "What kind of standards are you setting?" "I don't want that kind of relationship," I say. "I don't want flowers." I say, "Stop pretending that the point is the lilies and not the blood." Geode Man, 1970. When my father drove 10 hours north to my mother's all-girls college in upstate New York, he did not complain about the distance or the cold. They went to a bar called the Tin and Lint, where my father drank Schlitz and my mother drank gin rickeys. They went to the racetrack and bet on horses, my father paying and my mother favoring the dapple grays, no matter what their odds. But if their romance and my existence hinges upon a single moment, the geode is it. "Where are we going?" my mother asked. "The parking lot," my father said. "I have a present for you." He hefted it from the trunk of his car. The rock was the size of a small melon. "Thanks for the rock," my mother said. "It's a geode," my father said. "It has crystals inside." He took a hammer from the trunk and handed it to my mother. "What color are the crystals?" my mother asked. "I don't know," my father said. "They could be blue or purple or brown or gray. We have to crack it open to find out." "You crack it," my mother said, "and I sure hope those crystals aren't mud brown inside." The thing you have to understand about my mother is this: she meant it. My father swung, the rock split. My mother peeked, amethyst crystals. She kissed my father and they went to the bar. Hours later, as he walked her back to the dormitory, they heard giggling from the 3rd floor. Girls hung from the windows. "Geode Man," they called. "Come back and give us a rock, Geode Man." The geode sits in my parents' living room, and it frightens me, the rock, the story. I wonder if those crystals had been mud brown, would I have made it into this world at all? Guys and Dolls, 2004. I go to college and join a theater troupe, which troubles my mother. It is Christmas break and we are sitting on the couch in our living room. "Never date a man who knows more show tunes than you," my mother says. My father in the next room hears this. He enters the living room stage right doing the Charleston. "I've got the horse right here," he sings. "The name is Paul Revere." He Charlestons out of the room, stage left. "I'm serious," my mother says. My father re-enters somehow stage right again, singing, "Getting to know you, getting to know all about you." Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Frankie Walls, and I'm a sophomore film major with an English minor, and I'm another student guide for New Voices. So Elizabeth Lindsey Rogers is an American poet and essayist. She was raised in North Carolina and earned her bachelor's in creative writing from Oberlin. While she was there, she also earned her bachelor's degree in dance. She went on in her studies to earn a master's degree in poetry from Cornell. She has two books of poetry published, Chord Box, which was released in 2013, and The Tilt Torn Away from the Seasons, which was just released in February. Her poetry and chord box resonates with the nostalgia of learning to play an instrument and the connection she has with instructors and music itself. She also uses her text for depicting different human connections and relationships she's built in her past. In a radical shift in theme, The Tilt Torn Away from the Seasons is Rogers' imaginative, futuristic perspective of what life would be like if we lived on Mars. She addresses climate change and natural disasters and the effect that they have had on Earth presently and what they will eventually do to us. As a matter of course, she seems to say, Mars soon will end up like Earth did, because of humans and their need to colonize. The New World is mute to anything that lies inside. This line is from Amazonas Mars, a poem inside Tilt Torn Away that is directly correlating to Amazonas Planitia, one of the smoothest plains in Mars. Both Rogers' books are different and may connect to different audiences, some who resonate more with environmental justice and some who resonate with string instruments and their beauty. And it's okay if you don't really have a connection with either, because the way she uses her free verse and line spacing captures you. Rogers writes things that she is passionate about. She uses her emotions, and that is what connects you to the text. She makes you feel a part of her world of creation that is held in between the binding of her books.
Thank you so much for that introduction, and thank you everybody for being here. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay. I'm going to read two poems from The Torn Away from the Seasons. The first poem in the book was inspired by seeing the first panoramic photographs of Mars in 2012. When I saw these photographs, I couldn't help think about how the surface of Mars resembled the American West before it was colonized. And that becomes the kind of driving metaphor for the poem and for the rest of the collection. The Frontier. After the first 360-degree panoramic photograph of Mars. And all those years we'd pictured fire, a neon sign blinking vacancy, a world as red as that inside our bodies, but without the claustrophobia, the low ceilings of our skin. We didn't think of a sky azure only at sunset, or stones, a similar blue, scattered across the regolith. Now we know this pair of weary moons, the first one painfully slow, a pinprick taking 3 days to move across our vision. The second, Phobos, is the Western origin of fear, misshapen, mold gray. Every 4 hours it rises like the last potato of the famine. And by now I know, as you must, what it means to lose your lakes and oceans, to creak inside the riverbed, cross its sockets and arthritic elbows, to think of rain as a form, a tome of bygone remedies. I can only dream of what snow must do for the desert. The camera pans this world, like earth pocked by canyons. Like Liberty, the surface looks aged, a green patina. Over dune and dust, the rover's tracks are the only disturbance. Like a sidewinder or wagon ruts, the trail circles and circles itself again. Again, the ground made target practice. We come in peace, curiosity says, but that's how all our ships began. As I land, I weigh next to nothing. I leap 3 times as high, but there is no canopy, no timber for an axe. Apple seeds float. There won't be saplings next year, though spring goes twice as long. Imagine a Western set, a terrain of glare and scour. The unspoken agoraphobia drives us all into the saloon. The sheriff, the unshaven rogue, the virgin in blue gingham, the Indian and the hourglass whore. Horses are dead, whiskey still brown, but a grit in our throats. The first shot sounds in air this thin, muted as a powder puff. On cue, we turn. Picture how slowly, The shutter swings, doors float open. And I'll read the final poem in the book. This is a kind of a prayer, I think, for climate change. Agnus Dei, Mars. Less than a light year ahead, this atmosphere swirls and thickens towards equilibrium. The first conifers pricking the air, dawn a blue yonder, the robin's egg. This world that would not move, this world that once looked plain and red as sealing wax, covers its face with grass, with a noise like breath blown in a bottle. Despite the warnings, I'll step out, unhindered by tank or mask, become too winded for words or even listening. I'll wander through white blooms of greasewood, collapse at the mountain's foot. Our drifting, they say, is genetic in nature, a destiny hardwired in our cells or the stars. But on Earth, as the story goes, my kin cried out for mercy, sheep down to skin and bone. Their planet had grown too warm without passion. Everyone had to make a choice. We live now without animals, don't know how or what to confess. We only know one prayer. Make this soul a clear high note. Make the dust devils weaken. Make my cells repair. Keep me from ultraviolet arrows. Let the air I hold be sweet. Once, in place of the canary, we sent out a trio of women. A 6-lung test, red flues open. The younger two crossed and lived, rushed back to tell the good news. And the old one, they call her a miracle. They say she went out singing. Thank you very much.
Hi, thank you, Elizabeth. Hello, my name is May McDermott. I'm a junior writing major and English minor, and I'm pleased to introduce Andre Perry, an essayist, musician, and co-founder of the Mission Creek and Witching Hour Creative Arts Festivals based in Iowa City. Andre is interested in space, how it is occupied, and how it is stratified. From being surrounded by the rolling arms, bent legs, and hunched bodies of a fervent white audience at a Kendrick Lamar concert, to distinguishing between the uniforms of the thinking man's hipster and the downtown Flophouse Art School casualty, Andre explores what it means to occupy racial, social, pop cultural, and linguistic spaces. And yet his work is anything but confined. Even as he examines and questions boundaries, he works to push them in form and style. Whether framing a discussion as a multiple choice exam, a screenplay, a music review, or a fictional interview with Oprah, Andre shows how an essay's form can differently illuminate the question at hand. For indeed, his essays are a tapestry of interwoven questions, an exhaustive search for the hidden and unasked. Andre is an essayist who searches deeply and who lets the world into his work. Andre's debut essay collection, Some of Us Are Very Hungry Now, was published in February and is available now, and we are very happy to have him with us today.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Thank you for everyone for just being part of this today. I feel like we're on a day-to-day mode right now. And so I feel like this event counts for 3 days of feeling okay before going back to full anxiety again. So I appreciate it. Thank you for creating this community. I'll read a piece from the essay collection. Dear Emma, I was going 80 miles per hour down the interstate. The freezing rain was coming down fluidly and forming crystalline glaciers on my windshield. I'd been on the road for about 9 hours and I was making incredible time. I was going to get there so early. I was going to set a new record. I pulled into the left lane. I had the audacity to pass a truck. He was going about 70 and that was way too slow. I was far enough ahead of him that I decided to pull back over into the right lane. I had to bend down over the steering wheel. It was so hard to see anything out of the window with all that ice clutching at my windshield. Suddenly the car turned inward to the left and then swished around to the right. It only took a second and a half. Oddly calm, I acknowledged that I was no longer driving, no longer controlling the situation. The car and I were floating above the road on a smooth layer of ice. The truck was coming up behind me, going 70. I didn't try to turn back. I just pressed down steadily on the brakes and let the car take its course. I wasn't sure where we were going, but I tried to slow us down to alleviate the pain of the impact. It didn't seem like we were going so fast anymore. There was a stark beauty to it, sliding around America at night in a sturdy metal box. For a moment, the car wasn't a car, but a small room I was sitting in, careening back and forth as in a strong Californian earthquake. I saw that we had finally settled on a course heading directly at the right snowbank. Everything in the car began to shift, and I thought, almost at peace, well, this is it. We soared off the road and into the ditch. The car had firmly planted itself in a plot of icy grass. I was alive. Bob Dylan's Love Minus Zero, No Limit was playing on the stereo. The bridge at midnight trembles. It seemed absurd, though any song at that moment would have seemed absurd. The truck zipped by on the interstate. What was that driver thinking about me and my hubris? I got out of the car and looked around to assess any damage. It was cold and I was slipping all over the grass. My car looked okay. I got back in the driver's seat. I tried driving directly out of the ditch, but that was impossible. Instead, I put the car in first and backed up a bit so that I was in the flat part of the ditch. From there, I drove slightly up the hill in increments so that I can make it back to the shoulder and onto the road. I gathered myself and slowly pushed onto the highway, first going 40, then 50. I noticed then that in the midst of the ice storm, most cars were going that speed. Eventually, I turned the stereo back on, but I took that Dylan album off. It horrified me now. I listened to Marble Sky, ambient and glacial waves of sound undulated throughout the car. I worked my way up the road, feeling less like a man or a role model, yet older and wiser. I'd spoken to my parents on the phone earlier from the road, and they had said, "Be careful." And though I had known that they were right, I only now truly understood them. As I drove, I wondered if every piece of wisdom they had shared with me had been matched by some similar experience. It was then that I knew to some degree what it meant to be a parent and to live a long, full life. I thought of you and the future children we might have. I moved slowly, but with confidence, into the night.
Do we have Brendan's introducer with us?
Let's see, is it my turn?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm so sorry. Let's see. All right, let's
Away.
begin.
You were transported, I'm sure.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. It's good to see all of you. My name is Jason Langford, a sophomore writing major at Ithaca College. And today I have the pleasure of introducing Brendan Mathews, author of the short story collection, This Is Not a Love Song, and the novel, The World of Tomorrow. I read This Is Not a Love Song for the New Voices Festival this year during the semester while I was still at Ithaca College. The stories inside are poignant, moving, and viscerally real. And this book has since helped me adjust to life in quarantine, since it's practically one of my only constants. I've reread my favorite story, Heroes of the Revolution, a few times over the past few weeks. Why this story? It's about love in so many of its forms. Perhaps the most haunting part, not to give it away, is the ending. The protagonist, Adina, has a flashback to when her husband was killed. During that moment in her past, her husband called out for her, even as they were hunted. Mentally, she begged him to bury her name deep in his throat and let it lie there, where it could not betray him. Not only is the moment horribly real, but the image of burying a name deep in a throat to protect your loved one stayed with me long after reading. Why has it kept me sane during quarantine, you ask? Because the story reminds me that love is worth fighting for, no matter how hard life gets. Always, love remains. Mathews hails from upstate New York and graduated from University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. He went on to receive his MFA from the University of Virginia. Mathews is not only a great writer, but an avid Marvel fan as well, and he particularly enjoys Thor Ragnarok. When asked whether he likes to plot out what he writes beforehand, he said that he prefers to write and go with the flow of it, and then revise greatly later. I could definitely learn from this, as I tend to plot out entirely too much before sitting down to write. I hope you enjoy Mathews' writing as much as I have. Please join me in welcoming Brendan Mathews.
Thank you, Jason. That was great. I really appreciate the introduction. I think, like the other writers, we should all take someone on the road with us who can introduce us and spare us those first few minutes when you're trying to warm up the crowd. Thanks to Eleanor and to Chris, like I said, to Jason and to Leah as well, who also was one of my questioners at the class visit that I did for the students in the New Voices class, which was a real treat. I think for so many of us, a lot has been canceled, whether it's been events we were planning on, get-togethers with friends, coffee, a drink, a walk. A lot of things we've had to move into as virtual space. And so I would, like a lot of others, I was just so pleased that the festival was going to continue online and not be one of the other kind of casualties of social distancing. So thanks to everybody for bringing us together. I'm going to read a story, well, pieces of a story from the collection that Jason mentioned. This is not a love song. And I'm going to read some pieces from the title story, which is broken up into kind of vignettes, each of which is introduced by the description of a photograph. The narrator is a photographer, and she's describing over the course of the story a years-long close friendship with her friend Kat, who is a musician. So I'll sort of skip through pieces of that and give you a sense of something about the story. Okay. She was, oh, hold on one second. I gotta make sure that all my technology is working here. Great. She was Kitty to her parents, Catherine to the nuns in high school, Kate when she was in college. But to anyone who knew her then, Chicago in the first years of the 90s, her hands tearing at her guitar like a kid unwrapping a Christmas present, she had already become Kat. Like the rest of the art students and rockers in training, we lived in Wicker Park, where rents were low and apartments doubled as studios, rehearsal spaces, black box theaters, and flop houses. The park itself was still a rusty triangle of scalded grass, littered with needles and broken bottles. It would be a few years before the new trees and the swing sets and the dye yuppie scum stencils on the smooth brick 3-flats, before the press would hype Chicago as the next Seattle, and record company type started skulking around the bars. Back then, there weren't any boutiques on Damon selling $500 sweaters, just bodegas, auto body shops, and empty storefronts whose faded signs whispered of plumbing supplies and cold storage. Later, there would be the brief flurry of albums and magazine covers, but back then the only people paying attention to her were the music nerds on the lookout for the next band you hadn't heard of, and the rock critic from the Free Weekly who wrote mash note reviews of any girl with a guitar. And me, of course. But by then I'd been paying attention to her for so long that I'd started to make a career out of it. Interior, stairwell, evergreen street loft. She stands in the doorway, a ghost outlined by the yawning black of the stairwell. She looks drained, which is how she often looked in those days. Her arms are folded across her chest, and her skin bleeds into the t-shirt, white on white. Her hair must have been black then, because in the picture, it's fused with the empty space around her, and her face really pops. Jaw set, teeth bared, eyes canted to the side, as if the shutter caught her the second before she spit out some curse. Interior, fireside bowl, Fullerton Avenue. Kat is on stage, surrounded by cigarette smoke and crowd steam, her eyes raked up at the low black ceiling. The smoke drifts into the shafts of light pouring from the Tinker Toy rig overhead, and it gives a shape to the air. It makes visible the currents. You can see the way the heat from the crowd rises and then bends back on itself and ripples and swirls. For all the movement on the floor, from shoegazer swaying to manic pogoing to grand mal moshing, the real action is above, where the air surges with color, candy apple red and freeze pop green, children at play yellow and police light blue. Not that she ever looked at the crowd when she sang. The eyes of other people distracted her. The way those eyes begged for instant intimacy wasn't just an imposition, it was an affront, an assault even. Exterior, night, Lincoln Avenue, west of Halsted. I have a picture of that night, before the really bad stuff, or the really good stuff, depending on your point of view. She's just finished her set and she's standing behind the stage. The crowd is in a frenzy, screaming for the inevitable encore. She's making them wait and she's frozen in place, her fingers knit on the crown of her head and her elbows flared like wings. It's the posture of a runner at the end of a marathon, a way to open up starved lungs for a drink of pure air. She looks dazed, she looks happy. She looks like she might just lift off into the night sky, if not for the low ceiling, the apartment above, and the simple facts of matter and gravity. Interior, West Randolph Street condo. Someone at the party called me. Someone who knew that Kat had a roommate who might be able to put her back together and get her home, though I don't think getting her home was as much of a priority as getting her out of where she was. Where, in this case, being the gut-rehabbed third floor of a former slaughterhouse west of the Loop, a place owned by a guy who called himself a club promoter, which meant he had access to enough drugs and high-end sound equipment to turn any room into a party. This was when Kat was losing a lot of friends. This was when Kat was making worse decisions than usual. This was when Kat had started going places without me. I rang the buzzer and the alleged club promoter pointed to a door, and he didn't say hi or thanks so much for coming, or were really worried about her. He just said, in there. And in there was nothing I hadn't seen before, though maybe a little worse. She had one arm draped across the back of the bowl, and she was trying and failing to keep her hair out of her face. She had already puked a ton. I flushed the toilet, which Kat hadn't had the will or the ability to do, and she startled as the water roared in her ear. She looked at me through the sweaty fringe of her hair. I thought she was going to say my name, but she just said, "So sick," over and over again, like it was her mantra. She retched and threw up, retched and spit out a little more. She looked up at me again through her bangs, and her eyes were rolling in her head. She seemed like she was trying to focus. If I'd been a good friend, or any kind of friend, I would have held her hair and stroked her arm. I would have put a cool washcloth on her forehead and told her that it was going to be all right. I would have kept flushing with each heave and not let the bowl fill up with a night's casual poisoning. But instead, I swung out my Leica, a bulletproof camera, the one they use in war zones, and I started shooting. I got her leaning on the toilet bowl like a pillow. I got her with the stuff pouring out of her like tar. I got her lying on the cool floor, the frazzled burr of her head against the smooth, solid base of the bowl. Thanks.
Hi, everybody. My name is Diana Romero. I am, I'm a sophomore creative writing major and English minor, and I will be introducing Nomi Stone. Nomi Stone, author of Kill Class and Stranger's Notebook, is an award-winning poet and anthropologist from Washington, D.C. She currently teaches poetry at the University of Texas at Dallas. Winner of the Pushcart Prize and a former Fulbright Scholar, Nomi's poetry has appeared in places like American Poetry Review and the Best American Poetry, among others. Some of Nomi's writings and anthropological works stem from her interest in the aesthetics of rituals and the questions of awe. She explores questions like, how do you write beauty? How do you write violence? How do you represent your own location within a space that is not your own? I want you all to think about these questions as she reads from her poetry collection tonight. The poetry in her most recent collection, Kill Class, came from 2 years of field research from 2011 to 2013 in American military training camps set up to look like Middle Eastern villages in the fictional country of Pineland, North Carolina. The speaker in these poems, also an anthropologist, witnesses and participates in staged combat training exercises or war games. The ethnographic work is a powerful examination of war at the cellular level of a country. Nomi's poetry forces
We might have lost Diana there. Sadly, this is the danger of technological meetings. But I think we can go ahead and welcome Nomi. Unless, Diana, were you able to come back? No, I think she might have frozen. Well, I'm sorry to miss the rest of that introduction, but let's welcome Nomi Stone.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. It's really a total delight to be here. And thank you, Chris and Eleanor, for curating this gorgeous thing. And thank you to Diana in Frozen Absentia for your beautiful introduction. And thanks, everyone, for joining and being here together. So I'll start with two poems that are not in Kill Class, and then I'll read two poems that are in Kill Class. This is called Field Notes from a Catastrophe. Stars throw their snow on the water. Quietly, we gather a document with the numbers, the tiny echoing laughs, the rows of cabbage and their lush toughness, a list of every loved one's hungers. I love you, I'm here, don't go under. This next poem is called Waiting for Happiness, and it's a dog poem, and there should be more dog. So here we go. Waiting for Happiness. Dog knows when friend will come home, because each hour friend's smell pales, air paring down the good smell with its little diamond. It means I miss you, oh, I miss you. How hard it is to wait for my happiness, and how good when it arrives. Here we are in our bodies, ripe as avocados, softer, brightening with latencies, like a hot blue core of electricity, our ankles knotted to our calves by a thread, womb sparking with watermelon seeds we swallowed as children. The heart again badly hurt, trying and failing, but it is almost 5, says the dog. It is almost 5. Okay, so next I'm going to read a little bit from Kill Class, and Diana very generously offered a wonderful prelude, but just to reiterate it just for a moment myself, I'm an anthropologist as well as a poet. This book is based on over 2 years of fieldwork I did in American military training camps, observing pre-deployment exercises. And these war games, they're set up in spaces fashioned to resemble the Middle East, so fake Middle Eastern villages. Role players are hired to act out the insurgent and the villager and the mayor, etc. And those individuals are from the Middle East. I'll read a few poems from Kill Class. War game, plug and play. Wait, begin again, reverse loop, enter the stage. The war scenario has vegetable stalls, roaming animals, and people in it. The people speak the language of a country we are trying to make into a kinder country. Some of the people over there are good, others evil, others circumstantially bad. Some only want cash. Some just want their family to not die. The game says, figure out which are which. And this is called What is Growing in These Woods? And many of the exercise took place in the woods around the US. Green in here, gleaming like being inside a fable, with stalls of fruit you can't eat. To go home, leave crumbs. When the wood circles you back here instead, let the lost and the impossible ripen in you, ripen and go. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Amulya Ravitij. I'm a freshman English major at Ithaca College, and I'm the student guide for Alexandra Chang. The New Voices Festival has been a wonderful learning curve for me, and reading her work was an absolute pleasure. Alexandra Chang grew up in San Francisco and Davis, California, as well as in Shanghai. She received her MFA from Syracuse University and has been a freelance writer since 2013. She made her novelistic debut in March 2020 with Days of Distraction. It is the journey of a young Asian American woman as she navigates adulthood through identity struggles and her role in an interracial relationship. A coming of adulthood tale, Chang writes Days of Distraction with a clear narrative voice. As the main character muses, it is difficult to parse which parts of me come from my family, from being Chinese, from being American, from being a woman, from being of a certain generation, and from simply being. The Washington Post labeled Days of Distraction an immersive, emotionally honest novel, with a smart, thoughtful, funny, observant narrator. The beauty of Chang's work lies in the details and the way she tackles the thin lines between loneliness, dependency, and independence in her work. It is a striking novel to read, with the right doses of humor and existential thought. It is no wonder that George Saunders believes Alexandra Chang to be one of the most important of the new generation of American writers. Please help me welcome Alexandra Chang to our virtual festival.
Thank you so much for that really wonderful introduction. Is this volume okay? Seems great. So I'm going to read from the opening of Days of Distraction and just like a few paragraphs from it. People think I'm smaller than I am. For example, my feet. In fact, I wear a size 8.5 or 9. According to Google, these are the most common sizes for American women. Average is good, I reason. It means that wherever I end up in this country, it will be easy to find someone whose shoes I can borrow. Everything in our house smells of mildew, even with the dehumidifier running. In the morning, while Jay still sleeps, I take out the full tank of water collected from the overnight air and dump it in our front yard, a place full of sand and desert plants. The fog hangs low over the street of families and retirees. To the east, Sutro Tower jets through the clouds. If I walked west to the end of the block, then up the long, zigzagging stairs to the top of Grandview Park, and if not for this early fog, I'd be able to see all of the sunset with its rows of pastel houses, and past that, the vast green of Golden Gate Park, where in the northwest section, the all-female herd of bison roam their paddock. I've come to cherish this ritual in front of our small yellow house, watching the water pool dark, then sink into the ground. I know where I am and what I am doing. But now we are preparing to leave this all behind. This is the place and time in which the most average person is average in their own special way or learns to believe it. The ordinary can be powerful. The flower, the sidewalk cone, the clouds in the sky, the sunset, so many sunsets and skies, new shoes, a haircut, overheard pieces of conversation, pets and food for sure. Anything is up for curation if that's the story you want to tell. People you've never met can reach into the snippets of your day-to-day life, add it all up to make meaning. At least that's how it feels. Here, now. I know there are people who choose to opt out, though not many in this city, the center of pressure, where an office of somebody's came up with the notion of people being brands. Sharing and shouting isn't the issue so much as the corruption of living in real time. People experiencing everything at a remove through the eyes of a consumer, actual or potential, a future audience to judge. Some are adept at this anticipation. They gain massive followings. I do not fall into this category. I am on the other side, those long stretches of getting lost in a giant sticky web of other people's earlier moments. It's true not everyone lives like this or that. Only almost everyone I know. And I'll just end there and say thank you again to all of the readers, and thank you to everyone who's been involved in putting on this festival. And thanks for having me and listening.
Okay, hello. My name is Eliana Hood. I'm a graduating English major with a double minor in theater and writing. I'm honored to be introducing Jonathan Spector today. Besides serving as the co-artistic director of Just Theater in San Francisco, Jonathan is a prolific playwright whose plays have been produced and developed all over the country. With an inventive and playful approach to dialogue, Jonathan untangles the threads of those who seem different from one another, discovering strands that might unite, as he does in This Much I Know and Good, Better, Best, Bested, two plays that explore how we are judged responsible for what we do and our role as global citizens. His play Eureka Day won nearly every award in the Berkeley region upon its premiere, becoming a New York Times and Times Out New York critics pick with a featured review in The New Yorker. Eureka Day centers on a group of parents who comprise the board of a Berkeley area private school called Eureka Day. The parents pride themselves on their inclusive and progressive leadership. However, when one student contracts the mumps, a crack is exposed within this carefully curated group as an increasingly volatile vaccination debate begins. A reflection on politics and the precarious nature of democracy, Eureka Day explores with humor and empathy the deeper question that drives this decades-old debate, sparking it with fresh energy and perspective. Do we protect ourselves and our families first, or do we owe our first responsibility to larger society? Refusing to tout a single viewpoint, Jonathan gives each stance its fair due, in turn reminding us there's humanity beneath each opinion, no matter how polarizing we may view it. We're incredibly lucky to have Jonathan with us today and to be able to perform a short reading from this tremendous play. Thank you. And with that, we will now be reading the short excerpts from the play. So if I could ask everyone, except for our actors, to mute their videos or head to speaker view if you haven't already. We can get as close to the real experience as we can. Except for you, Jonathan, you can keep your video on. Everyone should be able to see who you are. And with that, I will introduce the actors. My fellow student guide and partner in crime, Adam Messinger, will play Dawn, the head of the school. Jada Boggs will play Karina. George Murray is Eli. Christina Ruvivar as Meiko. And I will be performing Suzanne. Now, this scene takes place in an emergency meeting Dawn has called for the board after receiving a letter from the county health department that a student has contracted the mumps. And the parents are discussing how to break the news to the school community. So with all of that talking, we will begin. Oh, are actors here?
Yeah, they should all still be there.
Okay. I don't see their videos on. Okay. Look, if we decide, if our stance is, you know, the school is going to be a resource to direct people to different kinds of information so they can make informed decisions, that would be one thing. But to just have this go to everyone and say nothing, it feels very irresponsible. I mean, they received this official sounding letter.
But isn't it actually just like an official letter?
That's what I'm saying.
I certainly was not assuming we would say nothing. That's why I wanted you all to, and I think you are right, Suzanne, that we want to be sensitive about how we approach this and wouldn't want to be perceived as adjudicating any more than we would for religion or political affiliation or dietary preferences. But this is just a document we're passing on. There's no judgment.
Well, to me, Don, what you just said is a little like, it's like you're saying, we welcome all religions. Now here's your copy of the New Testament.
That's a little, is it?
No, yeah, I can see that. Because it's like, is this what you're saying, Suzanne? That even if it's a message that we conceptualize as value neutral, we have to try to be cognizant of the way it's going to be received. Because it's really more about like individual parents' responsibilities.
I'm sorry, but doesn't it seem like, I mean, of course that makes sense, but shouldn't we be right in this moment, just like focused on, getting the message out?
I think that's right. I'm sorry, Eli, but I think she's right. Because our responsibility in this room is not actually first as individual parents. It's first as custodians of the school.
No, exactly.
The question isn't, what are my strongly held personal views? It isn't, what do I think is right as a parent? It's, what do I think is best for our community? Right, Karina?
I mean, no, yeah, of course.
And it strikes me that right now, what matters most is, like you said, getting the message out, that we are one community, a community of respect. And just to reiterate the principle of, I may not agree with your point of view, but I deeply respect your right to hold that point of view.
No, yeah, that's what I was saying.
So maybe it's in addition to, maybe we say something along the lines of, I'm just spitballing here, that we are a school of choice and a community of intention, and we come from diverse backgrounds and perspectives, but that we are all in this together, and that it's our diversity which is the source of our strength.
Beautiful.
And then at the bottom, we could include links to resources and say, here are some of the broad array of viewpoints in our community. I could point people to some very good websites.
Great. Would that work for you, Karina?
I'm not, to be honest, I'm not sure I'm 100% comfortable with that.
Oh, well, that's fine. Are you able to articulate what it is that's making you uncomfortable?
To just, if we're saying, here's what the health department says, and then here's something that refutes that, isn't that taking a position isn't a position then don't listen to the health department?
Oh, I don't think so.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that there needs to be balance.
Sorry I'm just thinking this is such a multifaceted, I don't know if the four of us can fully encapsulate. And we're always talking about looking for opportunities to showcase, to put our values into action. So maybe this is a great moment for community activated conversation.
What's that?
It's a bit like a town hall, but I guess more participatory.
It's a new initiative.
Last year, we had an 8th grade production of Peter Pan, which I don't know what they were thinking. So as you can imagine, there were some very strong feelings.
And aside from the extremely problematic portrayal of Native peoples, there's actually a whole host of colonialist issues in terms of the content that I, for one, had been completely blind to. So,
and the CAC was really, it was a very thoughtful discussion, and there were some great breakout sessions. And we came to what I thought was we set the production in outer space, and that really solved. I think everybody ended up feeling really good about that, and ever since we've been just looking for another moment to.
It's a wonderful idea, Eli.
Thank you.
it could be a pretty amazing opportunity, I think, to demonstrate for the students to see how we can come together as a community and exchange ideas around a difficult issue.
And if we did that, I would be willing to, would this work for you, Karina? We allow the letter to go out as is, and we let everyone know that before they rush into anything, that as soon as possible, ideally tomorrow, we'll be having a community activated conversation so that we can really delve into.
Yeah, no, that's great. That sounds great.
Perfect.
You know, it's Sylvia Coleman. She was the first board president before Suzanne. She used to always say, if consensus was easy, everyone would do it.
It's so true.
Sorry. I completely could not get out of the house. I thought Olivia was all better, but her fever came back and now her face is all swollen. I think she might be allergic to soy. Sorry, please continue. What'd I miss?
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all so much. That was so much fun to listen to, and having been so isolated for so long, it's great to have a little piece of theater with some people. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. A big thank you to all of our writers, and thank you to everyone in the audience who came out to listen to these voices. It has been so special, even with the imperfections of technology, to gather as a community of people who love language and story. Please come back tomorrow and Friday. But first, please go to buffalostreetbooks.com. And if you like what you heard tonight, buy a book, support our authors, support our independent bookstores. Thank you so much, and have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
Till tomorrow.
Hmm.